Okay, this is going to be a short video on a continuing video from my previous one. We talked about how to harvest pages out of a book for collaging. This time I'm going to talk a little bit about the page itself and the advantages and disadvantages of using book pages for your substrate. First, we'll talk about the advantages of using paper from old books. One of them is, as you can see, the patina of an older book. It's got that old parchment look to it. That it's kind of weathered, and you know, even the little bits, little nubbins that are imperfections are interesting. That you can make it look very interesting. This rough edge is interesting. The little breaks in the page. So it is a very interesting substrate. It brings a lot of personality to the piece before you even start. Now the other thing, it offers a lot of different variations as well. The type itself, the narration, or what it's about can also be interesting. You can get type in different languages. You can get musical scores. You can get maps. You can get novels that has a lot of interesting words and phrases. And it's interesting because I do collages with this paper from this one particular book, and I don't look at the paper. I don't look at the words at all. I just do the collage, and inevitably people say, "Oh, I love how you used the words that we saw in the background as part of the collage," and I have never done that, except in one case where I picked out one word, boss. That's in one of my paintings, one of my collages. But so it's interesting how it also brings another whole layer into the piece, because it has this, especially with fiction, it has a lot of words that the viewer, observer, or you as the creator can use to maybe spur your memory or spur your mind into thinking of a certain thing about the piece, that you may want, an element you may want to add, or it may just bring things together for you by looking at the words. Now, as I said, I don't do that, but it is sort of uncanny how after I do a piece I can look at the words and see some connection. I don't think it's subliminal. I just think it's the way our brains work as far as making sense of things. But that's neither here nor there. The other thing about using a substrate is there's no expense. I mean, very little expense. Now, I bought this old book from a bookstore. I think it was $1. You can find old books at library sales or in house sales. They're very inexpensive, and they have that beautiful patina on there. So that's also an advantage. Mostly, a lot of collages are done on watercolor paper, and there's a reason for that, which I'll mention what one of the disadvantages are to using this kind of paper. But so it's a very inexpensive way of using a substrate. Now, the thing about it is, if you do use it as a substrate, you're going to have to reinforce it. So this will be mounted on a acid-free paper that's thicker, so it will hold it together. And I'm doing that. I have I can show you that maybe later. So you can have all kinds of old paper with all kinds of different languages and symbols and textbooks, science texts, chemistry texts, whatever you want. And it can be the background, which makes it very interesting. And again, you don't start with a blank page. You're starting with something already, which is a really nice thing to do. The other thing, this is a little bit less to do with being a substrate. Old book pages are wonderful for just elements of a collage. So even if you don't use it for your substrate, for your base page, you can rip it up and use it in collaging in an infinite number of ways. Now, the disadvantage. One of them is, as you will see, here we have, we pull these papers out of a book and we look at them. We see a little imperfection there, and that's okay. I mean, I can put a piece of paper over that, or you can incorporate it into your piece. As I said, if you mount it on other paper, you don't have to worry too much about little things like that or little things like this. But if you notice, this goes like this. You notice there's a difference in margin. There's also a difference. Sometimes the books are off. They're not perfectly centered. And if you look at these separately, this margin is much wider than this margin, and this margin is narrower than this margin. It's because as a book, this is the gutter. That goes in the center of the gutter, the center of the book. It's called the gutter. And so you're not going to have your text in the center of the page. And I don't really think of it as a concern, and there's ways of ameliorating that just by how you place your papers and how you where you choose to put them. And sometimes it's fine to have them not totally equal, but there is something that you have to think about as far as these white spaces. And you'll also notice the space up here seems narrower than down here. Of course, it also has the title there, so that makes a difference. So there are some irregularities when the book is published that can affect how you're going to lay your papers down to bring a cohesive picture together. The other thing is that they are very fragile. I mean, you can't keep playing with it for too long, because they're very fragile, especially the older the book. They have that beautiful patina, but they're also, they can tear easily. I noticed when I'm putting, I glue something down and I want to replace it, or I made a mistake, or I want to realign it, I start to pull it out and all the typeface comes out. Now that's also a way of a technique of collaging. It's called decollage. It's when you put something down, you rip it off. But with these old papers, when you rip things off, you take the type with it, and sometimes you make a hole in the paper too. So, that could be an issue when it's just a frailer paper. The other thing is, you're going to be limited as to what you're going to put on the paper besides other paper. I mean, you can use glue, you can use paper, but the minute you start using medium of any kind, it could be pen, charcoal, watercolor, acrylic paint, you're going to run into some issues with the older paper. I can't imagine being able to use watercolor on these pages. I think it would just disintegrate it. Now, you could put gesso on it, and then probably clear gesso, and then probably be able to put medium on it. But that's another step you need to take, but that's not the worst thing that could happen. So you have to treat the paper a certain way for you to put more medium on there. And certainly it would not hold any assemblage type piece. It's just too small. I mean, too light, too fragile. If you work with the same paper all the time, it's great, but eventually you may run out of this paper because it's from one book itself, and you may have trouble mixing and matching your colors together. Let's say you worked a year on a series, and then 2 years later you find you have to fix something or do something, and you don't have any more of the paper, and you can't find paper that's the same. So there is always, even though there's a inexpensive supply, there's also a limited supply of paper. Now, the other thing I want to bring up just briefly is I show you a page that I did recently, and I'm going to talk more about this in my second video, of another video that comes after this one. This one here, I love this painting, or this, I always call it painting, but they're collages. And one of the reasons I love this collage so much is because it's got the print in it, but there's still a lot of white space. And I like that there's words in here, simple words, simple phrases. That really appeals to me. So my next book, I got a book on eBay. It's a poetry book, an old poetry book from the 1800s. And I'm excited about using a poetry book. So I have a little bit more white space, and and then clear nouns and verbs in there. I think that'll be kind of interesting. Again, so this is just a real quick video on the advantages and disadvantages of using old old papers from old books. And I love the way it looks on my collages. The other thing that kind of has something to do with at the end of making a collage, when a collage is finished, you know, how are you going to mount it? What kind of fixative are you going to put on it? Are you going to put it under glass? Are you going to, you know, put it in a frame? Are you going to use it? It's going to be a matte. Is it going to have, what kind of fixative is on it? And that, again, because it's a medium, you're going to have to be careful. You're going to have to take some samples, make some sample collages, and try the different fixatives on them to see if it's going to, how it's going to affect the paper, how it's going to affect the picture itself, the collage itself. So that is that. Thanks for watching, and I'll have another video about collaging soon. Have a great day.